While studying in London, Savarkar was not only organizing revolutionary activities, he also fighting a battle of ideas. He understood that to inspire Indians to seek freedom, they first need to reclaim their own history. At the time, British historians described the events of 1857 as nothing more than a sepoy mutiny, limited rebellion by a group of dissatisfied soldiers. This version of history was taught across the British Empire and was intended to portray the uprising of disorganized and insignificant. But Savarkar saw things very differently. After extensive research in libraries, archives, and historical records in London, he became convinced that the uprising of 1857 was far more than a military revolt. In his view, it was the first United Nations effort by Indians to overthrow British rule and regain their independence. He determined to challenge the colonial narrative. Savarkar began writing a groundbreaking book titled The Indian War of Independence 1857. It was an ambitious work that brought together the stories of soldiers, kings, queens, peasants, and other citizens who had fought against the British authority. Through the book, Savarkar highlighted the bravery of leaders such as Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, Nana Sahib, Bahadur Shah Jafar, and countless others. He portrayed them not as the rebels or the traitors, but as the patriots who had sacrificed everything for their motherland. What made the book truly revolutionary was its message. Savarkar argued that Hindus and Muslims had fought side by side during the uprising, united by common desire for freedom. He presented in 1857 as a national struggle that transcended regional, social, and religious boundaries. As news of the manuscript spread, British authorities became alarmed. Even before the book could be officially published, efforts were made to suppress it. The British government considered it dangerous because it had a potential to inspire a new generation of revolutionaries. Yet, the ban could not stop its journey. The manuscript was secretly printed outside Britain and smuggled into different countries. Copies circulated among Indian nationalist and revolutionary groups despite constant surveillance by the authorities. The book quickly became one of the most influential works in the freedom movement. For many young Indians, it transformed the way they viewed their history. It taught them that the resistance to the British rule was not a new idea. It was a part of a long tradition of sacrifice and struggle. The heroes of 1857 became symbols of courage and determination and national pride. The publication of The Indian War of Independence 1857 was more than a release of history book. It was a powerful act of intellectual resistance. Through its pages, Savarkar challenged the British version of history and gave Indians a new perspective on their past. In doing so, he ensured that the memory of 1857 would live on, not as a mutiny, but as a defining chapter in India's quest for freedom. The book would go on to inspire generations of revolutionaries, making it one of the most significant literary contributions to India's independence movement. On 21st December 1909, Gandhi assassinated Arthur Mason Jackson, commonly known as A.M.T. Jackson, the British collector of Nasik, at the Vijay Anand Theatre in Nashik. A farewell function had been organized in Jackson's honor before his transfer. The Marathi play Sangeet Sarda was being staged there. Gandhi shot Jackson as he arrived to watch the performance. By 1910, Savarkar had become one of the most feared Indian revolutionaries in the eyes of British Empire. From his base in London, he had inspired young nationalists, published revolutionary literature, and built connections with freedom fighters across the continents. The British authorities knew that his influence was spreading rapidly and they determined to stop him. On 13th March 1910, Savarkar was arrested in London on charge related to revolutionary activities and allegedly involved in supplying arms to the Indian revolutionaries. The British government decided to extradite him to India, where he would face trial under heavy security. But Savarkar was not a man who accepted defeat easily. On 1st July 1910, he was placed aboard the British steamship SS Moria, which was carrying him from England to India. Throughout the voyage, Savarkar carefully observed the ship, the guards, and every possible opportunity to escape. He knew these might be his last chance to regain his freedom. Then came the historic morning of 8th July 1910. As the ship was anchored at the French port of Marseilles, Savarkar requested permission to use the washroom. Once inside, he noticed a small porthole. What happened next would become one of the most daring escape attempts in the history of India's freedom struggle. With extraordinary determination, Savarkar squeezed his body through a narrow porthole and plunged into the waters of the Mediterranean Sea. Despite being under custody and surrounded by guards, he swam towards the French shore and driven by a single goal, freedom. The guards were stunned. A massive alarm raised as Savarkar reached the coast and began running through the streets of Marseille. For a brief moment, he had successfully escaped from British custody. His plan was to seek protection under the French law as he reached French territory. However, fate had other plans. Before he could secure a legal assistance, British officers, aided by the local authorities, caught up with him and arrested him once again. He was forcibly taken back to the ship and placed under even stricter security. The incident soon attracted international attention. Questions were raised about whether the Savarkar re-arrest on French soil was lawful. The matter eventually became the subject of legal discussion between Britain and France and was even referred to the International Tribunal. Although the decision did not favor Savarkar, his courageous attempt captured the imagination of the people around the world. For many Indians, the Marseille escape became a symbol of fearless resistance. Here was a man who, even while being transported as a prisoner, refused to surrender hope. He was willing to risk his life in open sea rather than submit quietly to colonial rule. Following his return to India, Savarkar was tried and sentenced to 2 life imprisonments amounting to 50 years and later was sent to Dhar. Yet the story of Marseille ensured that his name would forever be associated with courage, determination, and unbreakable desire for freedom. Even in chains, Veer Savarkar had shown the world that the spirit of revolutionary could never be imprisoned. Imagine being sentenced not for few years in prison but 2 life imprisonments, 50 years in total, being separated from your family, your homeland, and all hope of freedom. This was the fate that waited for Savarkar after his conviction by the British government. After being apprehended and put on trial, Savarkar was convicted to consecutive life sentences in 1911 and taken to Cellular jail in Andaman Islands, a punishment known across India as the Kalapani or the Black Waters. For Indian revolutionaries, Kalapani was considered worse than death. Located thousands of kilometers away from mainland India, the Cellular jail was specifically designed to isolate prisoners from society. The prison consisted of hundreds of solitary cells, each built to ensure that prisoners could neither communicate with one another nor organize resistance. Every revolutionary who entered its gate was meant to be broken, physically, mentally, and emotionally. When Savarkar arrived at the Cellular jail, he was stripped all of its privileges. He was no longer treated as a political prisoner. Instead, he was treated like an ordinary criminal and subjected to hardest forms of punishment. One of the most notorious punishments involved the oil mill, known as Kolu. Prisoners were forced to walk in circles for hours, turning a heavy wooden beam used to crush coconuts and extract oil. The work is backbreaking. Many prisoners collapsed from exhaustion, yet the jail authorities demanded impossible daily quotas. Failure to meet these targets invited severe punishment. Savarkar, despite his education and intellectual stature, was forced to perform this grueling labor day after day. Another punishment involved coir pounding. Prisoners have to manually separate coconut fibers using their bare hands. The rough fiber tore into their skin, causing bleeding, wounds, and painful blisters. Even when their hands became swollen and injured, the work continued. Savarkar was punished with 7 days of standing handcuffs in Cellular jail for defying prison authorities, either by secretly communicating with the fellow prisoners or refusing to perform the harsh forced labor assigned to him. The punishment required him to remain standing for long hours with his hands cuffed to a fixture above the shoulder height, causing a severe physical strain and suffering. The food served in the prison was often inadequate and unhygienic. Meals were frequently infested poorly cooked, and insufficient for the prisoners performing hard labor. Hunger became a constant companion. The British jail administration also relied heavily on psychological torture. Prisoners were kept in a solitary confinement for longer periods. Savarkar spent years in isolation, locked inside a small cell with a little human interaction. The intention was clear: to crush the spirit of those who dared to challenge the British Empire. Several prisoners who passed away at the Cellular jail, Kalapani, due to execution, torture, illness, or hunger strikes were not given the appropriate funeral rites. In order to avoid public grieving and disturbances among the fellow convicts, British authorities frequently disposed of their remains secretly by weighing them down and tossing them into the sea near the Andaman Islands. Inside the prison walls, he continued to educate fellow prisoners whenever opportunity arose. He encouraged them to remain strong and maintain faith in India's future. Since paper and pen were often unavailable, Savarkar composed poems and historical writings from memory. It is said that he wrote poetry on the walls of prison and committed thousands of lines to memory, which were then passed down to the other inmates. Despite unimaginable suffering, he transformed the prison into a place of learning and inspiration. Revolutionaries from different parts of India found strength in his words and leadership. Years passed in the Cellular jail. The British believed that distance, isolation, and punishment would erase Savarkar's influence. Instead, his reputation grew stronger. Stories of his endurance and sacrifice began reaching the Indian mainland, inspiring countless patriots in the freedom movement. The Cellular jail was designed to break men, but in Savarkar's case, it revealed the extraordinary strength of his character. On 6th January 1924, Savarkar was released from Yerwada jail, but was interned in Ratnagiri under the strict restrictions. The British confined him there to limit his political influence and keep him under close surveillance while preventing his participation in nationalist activities. The story of Veer Savarkar in the Cellular jail is not merely a story of punishment. It is a story of courage in the face of suffering, hope in the face of despair, and unshakable commitment to the dream of free India. When people hear the name Veer Savarkar, they often think of the fearless revolutionary who challenged the British Empire, endured the horrors of the Cellular jail, and dedicated his life to India's freedom struggle. But there is another chapter of his life that deserves equal attention: his fight against the social discrimination and untouchability. After years of imprisonment in Cellular jail and later confinement in Ratnagiri, Savarkar lived under the strict British restrictions and barred from political activities. The colonial government believed these restrictions would silence him and limit his influence. Instead, Savarkar turned his attention to social reform, focusing on the issue of untouchability. At that time, millions of people faced discrimination, including denial of temple entry, access to the public wells, and participation in social and religious life. He believed that a divided society could never become a strong and united nation. He often argued that if Indians want to stand united against foreign rule, they first needed to remove barriers among themselves. According to him, national unity could not be achieved while larger sections of society continue to face discrimination. With his vision, Savarkar launched a series of social reforms initiatives in Ratnagiri. He organized community gatherings where people from different castes could participate together. He encouraged social interaction across the caste boundaries and promoted the idea that all Hindus should enjoy equal rights and dignity. One of his most important initiatives was the promotion of interdining, where people from different castes would sit together and share meals. Today, this may seem ordinary, but during that period, it was considered revolutionary in many parts of society. Savarkar also encouraged access to education for all sections of society and advocated equal participation in religious and cultural life. The most significant symbol of his movement came in 1931 with the establishment of Patit Pavan Mandir in Ratnagiri. The name itself carried a powerful message. Patit Pavan means purifier of fallen. What made this temple extraordinary was that it was open to all Hindus regardless of castes. At a time when many temples imposed restrictions based on their social status, Patit Pavan Mandir stood as a bold declaration of equality. People who had traditionally been denied entry into the places of worship could now enter the temple and offer prayers alongside others. This was not merely a construction of a religious building, it was direct challenge to the centuries-old social barriers. Mahatma Gandhi visited Veer Savarkar at his residence in Ratnagiri during a period when Savarkar was living under the British restrictions. Their meeting brought together two influential leaders who, despite differing political views, shared a common commitment to India's future. The outbreak of Second World War on 3rd September 1939 changed the course of history. Veer Savarkar urged Indian youth to join armed forces, believing the military training would prepare them to nation's eventual struggle for freedom. Meanwhile, Subhash Chandra Bose carried the dream of an armed revolution forward by raising the Indian National Army. The war weakened the British Empire and ultimately paved the way for India's independence. On 15th August 1947, India finally achieved independence after nearly 2 centuries of British rule. The birth of a free nation marked the culmination of countless sacrifices made by the revolutionaries, freedom fighters, and political leaders across the generations. As India's freedom struggle became history and a new nation began its journey, Savarkar entered the final chapter of his remarkable life, having spent decades as a revolutionary, political leader, social reformer, and writer. He had witnessed both the triumph of independence and the challenges that followed. One of the most controversial moments in his later life came after the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi on 30th January 1948. In the aftermath of tragedy, several individuals were arrested, and Savarkar was also taken into custody based on the allegations of the involvement in the conspiracy. The case attracted national attention. Savarkar was brought before the court and faced trial along with other accused. During the proceedings, the prosecution attempted to establish a connection between the Savarkar and the conspirators. However, after examining the evidence presented before it, the court found that there was insufficient evidence to prove the charges against him. As a result, Savarkar was acquitted and released. The court did not convict him in the Gandhi's assassination case. Despite the acquittal, the controversy surrounding the case continued to be debated in public and political circles for decades. In the years that followed, Savarkar gradually withdrew from active political life. He devoted his time to writing, reflection, and intellectual pursuits. Having spent much of his life fighting for the causes he believed in, he increasingly felt that his duties to the society had been fulfilled. By the mid-1960s, Savarkar's health had begun to decline. At the age of 82, he made a deeply personal decision. He announced that he had completed his life's mission and chose to undertake Atmaarpan, the voluntary renunciation of food, medicine, and worldly attachments. On February 1, 1966, Savarkar began his fast. Days passed as he gradually withdrew from physical sustenance. Supporters, followers, and admirers watched with him concern, but Savarkar remained firm in his decision. Finally, on 26 February 1966, Veer Damodar Savarkar passed away in Mumbai at the age of 82. Even today, decades after his passing, Veer Savarkar remains one of the most influential debated figures in Indian history. Admirers remember his courage, sacrifice, and dedication to the nation, while historians continue to study and discuss his ideas and legacy. Whatever one's perspective, there is no denying that Veer Savarkar left an indelible mark on India's history, a mark forged through struggle, conviction, and the unwavering commitment to the causes he believed in. Jai Hind!